From the Evening Standard in London, I'm David Marsland, and this is The Leader.
So we are exporting a lot to countries that are themselves producing vaccines, and we think this is an invitation to be open, so that we also see exports from those countries coming back to the European Union.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen didn't name any countries in this warning shot given at a news briefing earlier. Thankfully, one of the journalists there asked her to be a bit more specific.
In the last 6 weeks, actually 10 million doses by now have been exported to the UK. It is the country number one, what exports from the European Union is concerned. And indeed, what the United Kingdom is producing AstraZeneca.
So is this a potential vaccine war breaking out between the EU and the UK? A threat to block exports of COVID-19 jabs from Europe to here, and other countries making supplies but allegedly not sending them across the continent? Our Deputy Political Editor Nicholas Cecil is with me now. Nicholas, this appears to be a pretty extraordinary intervention by the EC President. What is happening?
Yes, Ursula von der Leyen, I think, caught a lot of people by surprise at lunchtime today. She held a press conference and detailed how the EU felt it wasn't getting proper supplies from AstraZeneca of its vaccines. And then basically said if it couldn't get exports into the EU, it would look at restricting them being exported from the EU. Now, Britain is getting millions of doses of the Pfizer vaccine from Belgium. And Ms von der Leyen certainly seemed to have the UK clearly in her sights. She says,
open roads run in both directions. And this is why we need to ensure that there is reciprocity and proportionality. If the situation does not change, we will have to reflect on how to make exports to vaccine-producing countries dependent on their level of openness.
And then she stressed, we are ready to use whatever tool we need to deliver on that. And there seems to be some very bad feeling the other side of the channel that we are getting Pfizer jabs from mainland Europe, but certainly at the moment it doesn't look like we're exporting any AstraZeneca jabs across the channel.
But I thought Germany, France, Spain, lots of countries around the EU didn't want the AstraZeneca jab.
Yes, this is all very confusing because the vaccination programme in the UK is going very smoothly. Around 25 million first doses have been delivered, including more than 2.5 million in London. In the UK, there's no great concerns over the Oxford AstraZeneca jab, but in the EU, there are some concerns over a very small number of cases where people have developed blood clots. Now, there's no evidence to show so far that this is linked to the vaccine, and actually the incidence of these blood clots is lower in people who have had the AZ vaccination, as far as we can see, compared to the general population. So there's still some concern in some EU countries. The European Medicines Regulator is looking at this, and then I expect the use of the AZ vaccination will resume in Italy, France, Germany, and other EU countries. But it certainly just adds to this feeling of chaos and confusion in the way the vaccine has been rolled out in mainland Europe. The European Commission was very slow at ordering supplies in the first place. It also doesn't seem to properly ensure that there were sufficient production facilities to ensure these supplies were reliable. And now lots of national leaders in the EU are facing criticisms from their electorates over the slow pace of the rollout.
Now, Boris Johnson told the Commons earlier that he will definitely have the AstraZeneca jab when it comes to his turn to be vaccinated.
I finally got news that I'm going to have my own jab, Mr. Speaker, very, very shortly. I'm pleased to discover I don't know whether the right honourable gentleman's had his. He's had his. But it will certainly be Oxford AstraZeneca that I will be having.
Has he said anything about Ms von der Leyen's comments today?
So far, Mr Johnson hasn't personally responded, but his official spokesman did. He was stressing that Mr Johnson and Ms von der Leyen held talks earlier this year about this export mechanism being introduced in the EU. And at the time, it was stressed that this was aimed at increasing transparency to so that they knew what was happening. Downing Street is today, this afternoon, saying that basically the EU needs to, quote, stand by its commitments. And it is also warning that all countries are dependent on global supply chains and the EU shouldn't be putting in place restrictions which endanger global efforts to fight the virus. So this row over vaccines and vaccine nationalism has just exploded today, and in quite an unexpected way.
And there was another unexpected grenade thrown into all of this earlier when Dominic Cummings, remember him, Nicholas? He's been back in the headlines. The Prime Minister's former aide was talking to MPs on the Science and Technology Committee when he started to criticise the Department of Health and its handling of COVID.
It's not coincidental that the vaccine programme worked the way that it did. It's not coincidental that to do that we had to take it out of the Department of Health. We had to have it authorised very directly by the Prime Minister and say, strip away all the normal nonsense.
But regardless of whatever did happen there, the government's vaccination programme has been doing very well, and there's been more announcements on that today.
Yes, this morning Matt Hancock announced that people aged 50 and over were now eligible for the vaccination. But with Dominic Cummings, there's always a risk, a danger that something unexpected will happen, and he certainly threw a grenade into the government's media planning this morning with his scathing criticism of what was happening in the Department of Health.
So it does appear that this roadmap, which was announced by the government, is still on track, and we are still on course to come out of lockdown.
Yes, certainly there's some interesting data for London this morning. COVID cases and COVID rates for the over 60s and under 60s has been broadly similar for much of the year, slightly higher amongst the younger people. But now, if you look at the figures, that there's a marked difference, that for London's aged 60 and over, the 7-day rate is now 23.4 new infections per 100,000 people a week. And if you compare that for the rate for those 59 and under, which is 42.4, so not quite double for the younger age group, but certainly kind of heading that way. And what these figures basically confirm is that the vaccine is having an impact. So the older age group are getting vaccinated, and therefore their COVID case rate has fallen more sharply than younger people. These younger people often, they are more likely to go out to work, and they're more likely to get the virus for other reasons. But even so, now there's a marked difference, which shows the success of the vaccination programme.
We have more on this in the Evening Standard newspaper and online at standard.co.uk. Follow our live blog for the latest updates. And that's The Leader. We're back tomorrow at 4 p.m.